This leads us to our next topic. So there's huge amounts of competition, of course, and jockeying for position in this AI world. There's, of course, the concern of acceleration, of takeoff, of recklessness, of a lack of safety. This has been discussed week in and week out in the topic of AI. A few weeks ago, Ilya left and the head of safety quit and others quit all at OpenAI, leading people to speculate like, hey, what's going on over there in the category of safety? And now, I think just now, as we started recording, there's been a release in the New York Times where OpenAI insiders and former OpenAI employees and Google current and former employees have signed an open letter criticizing the recklessness and the lack of safety controls and the rush to commercialization and competition in the AI space. And so this has been going on for a while, right? This is the reason Sam Altman got fired, is the board did not believe that he was taking things seriously. It's the reason why Elia and the head of safety left a few weeks ago. And now these guys are posting an open letter in the New York Times. I mean, what do we make about this? Is this just, when we were at Uber, Emil, like people just loved to go outside the tent and piss in. They just would love to talk about, we're doing this, we're doing that. And these narratives would emerge that when you actually look at them and you actually pair them back to the real facts, we're sort of full of shit or we're just someone's opinion. So this might be some group of people in the safety team who think that the entire business and the entire product strategy should be about safety and should go through 70 safety gates. And the product team is like, no, we don't need 70 safety gates. We need 20 safety gates. And the head of safety is like, you guys aren't prioritizing safety. And you can just imagine that these people have a certain perspective and they're just reacting to their own myopic worldview. I think it's just as likely that as anything else. What do you guys think?
When has regulation slowing things down ever worked in the history of mankind? We're like, thank God this never happened because of this technological advance. And yeah, okay, this is different. Blah, blah, blah. But I fundamentally worry that no commercial enterprise will do a good job regulating themselves because competition will force them to not. And there'll always be one player, XAI, who's not, although Elon's like been more safety oriented than Sam, but
Elon's had more safety rhetoric than Sam.
Fair enough. But I use Grok AI. It just hasn't hit the zeitgeist yet in terms of the outputs of Grok. But I guess I wouldn't rely on any one company to do it themselves because I think the profit motive would deteriorate that. And I think there's a worry that China won't have those things and will exceed us. But they also are about ham-handed government officials writing stupid crap like it was in that executive order. Like if you're using this many teraflops, I don't know if you read the draft California law. It was absurd. Totally absurd. You had to predict the consequences of what the AI models put out. You had to apply to some civil rights division of California for permission. It taxed your worldwide revenues. It was off the charts. So who's the complaint to about safety? Who are you complaining to?
Well, they're complaining to the public, presumably.
Great. So what does the public do about it?
I think this is a valid and important question. Here's where I agree. First of all, I think the idea of companies self-regulating, taking responsibility for safety themselves is never going to work for the reasons that you said, right? Which is that the least responsible companies are the ones that are going to end up winning. So the incentive structure of the corporation is not around self-regulation. That is not a bug, it's a feature, which is why you have government regulations. And I am not anti-government regulation in principle, right? If you think about seatbelt laws in cars, airbag laws in cars, in fact, automotive safety is a great example of effective government regulation. Now, I also agree that AI is a lot more complicated than cars, and a lot of the proposed regulations are not effective regulation. They don't effectively balance the safety needs of the public with the benefits that come from progress and so on. And so the question, which is not a rhetorical question, it's a real and difficult one. What does good regulation look like? You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, because the current regulations are bad and because companies cannot regulate themselves, that there should be no regulation of AI safety.
No,
I just don't know what that looks like.
I agree. I don't disagree. I want to have faith that there could be rules of the road by a government that are smart, like the ozone stuff that we had in the 90s, the Clean Air Act, some of those seatbelt laws, airbag. I guess I have less confidence that I look around and see any proposal from any major government that I say, you know what, that's pretty smart. But that doesn't mean I would wish that. I do wish it. Yeah.
I think you have to recognize, though, at the time with these seatbelt laws and what have you, they were also derided as overreach, as unnecessary, as paternalistic, certainly by the car companies. They ran all sorts of campaigns of do you really want to wear a belt in the car? All this kind of stuff. A lot of regulation at first appears off track or unnecessary or invasive. But yeah, AI is way more complicated than a car. We've tried to cover this multiple times. We've all tried to talk about this in our private conversations. It's just such a difficult thing to wrap your head around because the technology is so complicated, so powerful, accelerating at such a rate. The exponentials on top of exponentials are so mind-boggling, and the implications are so hard to understand and predict. We are literally playing with fire, and we don't know how to control it.
We're metaphorically playing with fire, Chris, but yes.
Well, I mean, at least with fire, we saw it in the wild, right? We saw how fires worked before we knew how to harness it. Here, the only thing we've got to go on is science fiction. And science fiction does not bode well for us, right? There's like maybe one utopian science fiction show and movie in the history of the world is the Star Trek. Everything else is like, you guys are going to die. That's kind of like, that's the story.
Let me run a proposal past you. I had an idea. I'm sure it's not an original one. I'm sure other people have had it. But like a lot of what I think about this AI regulation is perhaps it's happening at the wrong layer, at the wrong level of abstraction, trying to regulate models and parameters and what their outputs are. If what we're really worried about is a runaway out of control AI, the truth is that for the foreseeable future, a vast majority of the compute power dedicated to AI is going to be happening in large centralized data centers. Sure, there's more AI moving to the edge, but that is true. So why don't we legislate or regulate that all of these data centers have a fully manual kill switch mechanism? That, let's say, the military has the ability to execute that kill switch, right? So if we end up in a war with the Terminators, we actually have a way of just cutting off the power supply to them. Like, it sounds dramatic, but if we're talking about safety, it feels like the physical layer is going to be a lot easier way of managing the safety of these devices than trying to go into the actual model layer that nobody understands anyway.
I think that's a very blunt instrument. What about a multi-tenant data center? Or what about people sort of having things on individual servers if they want to misuse them? But I think you point an interesting point is like, what if you regulated the behavior? Like, we regulate pornography on the internet as it relates to children, and you punish that severely. So maybe you have to say like, okay, you can't do a ghost gun, or you can't do certain biology sort of stuff, or you regulate seeking the output. Again, I'm thinking about this in real time, but somehow you have to have the tool, but you have to have prohibited uses. And yes, you were right, Chris, from before that seatbelts, people pushed back, but it was different because it wasn't a global competition to like not have seatbelts. It was like an individual safety thing. And what we did there is we required all the automakers to do it. So they're all on the level playing field. They all had to spend the money to do seatbelts, and they pass it on to consumers. This one, the regulations so far have been very promotional of the big guys, like who could afford a content moderation team and could do all these things. So I don't know if a kill switch works, but there's some thread there which is interesting, which is like, how about certain uses? You can't do deep fakes of under 18 people. You can't access copyright material. You can't blah, 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 blah. That becomes a long list potentially, but maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah, so I've heard this idea before, and it has been, to my mind, one of the better ideas around regulating AI is we already have laws about what you're allowed to do in the world, and we can add a few more. And then it's about your behavior in the world with the tool versus the tool. I do think there's something to that. But the most interesting and brain-bending idea that I've heard about this is from Tristan Harris, who I actually don't like his rhetoric a lot. He's the guy that did The Social Dilemma, which is this whole documentary on Netflix about how bad Facebook is and all this kind of stuff. And there are episodes where I've had a whole tirade against blaming social media for society's ills. But his point was a really good one, which is we've already made first contact with AI. It's called the Facebook algorithm and the social media algorithm. And it's already massively affected our society in negative and unintended ways. And so the next horizons of interaction with AI, can you imagine just how bad those nuclear level weapons are going to be? And his point was, forget AGI, forget Terminator 2, forget these like fanciful, dramatic, theatrical outcomes. There are all of these steps from here to there, mass misinformation and cybersecurity and bioengineering and all this stuff that doesn't require a computer to think for itself in a data center somewhere where, Yaniv, to your point, you can pull the plug. It's all of these subtle society-breaking implications that we won't even understand until it's too late. And I just don't know how you regulate that.
That you can't regulate.
Right. And I'm just so conscious as we talk about this, boys. Like, are we the old men going, get off our lawn and we're afraid of the future? Like, you never want to be that.
I'm not. This is different than social networking because that was putting humans together in a cage and having them have a cage match or a beauty contest or, various forms. This is a little bit more gleaning knowledge. And I think the risks from this are, number one, gleaning knowledge that we don't want everyone to have, like how to build a dirty bomb or how to create a new virus. Those are existential risks. The other risk that's actually knowable is the mass potential unemployment that happens in a chunky way. Like, I'm an optimist in the long run that to the extent there's displacement, I believe that generally well-run economies will absorb work for those people, but there will be rocky moments. And look at all the Indian outsourced call centers. That might just get hit like a bomb from a displacement standpoint all at once. It may be recoverable for that population, but it's going to have, step function sort of changes. So I feel like if you could solve problem one, which is the existential weird thing that gives small number of people immense power over larger because they could get access to building things that are dangerous for humanity. The unemployment thing, I think that is solvable, and I'd take that risk.
Yeah, it's so funny because firstly, you talked about people in a cage, having a beauty contest. I mean, we're all on this cage called planet Earth.
Oh, that's beautiful, Chris.
These countries are fighting it out for political and military dominance. We're in a cage battling it out using AI tools. And there are so many layers of safety concerns. And I feel like these guys that are talking about alignment and safety are talking about what answers the LLM will give you. But they're not talking about mass unemployment and societal disruption. No. And
they're worried about like runaway AGI. Like they're quite specific about that, right?
They're concerned about the chatbot answering the wrong kind of question all the way through to runaway AGI. But I don't see them concerned about entire call centers being hollowed out, entire knowledge workers being hollowed out, entire economies being hollowed out. And so when we talk about safety, to your point, Emil, there are so many vectors of danger here at so many layers and levels of society. I don't think any safety team anywhere or any regulation anywhere is going to be able to contemplate that. We're kind of trying to make sure the frosting is fat-free and the whole cake is made up of calories.
My final point on this is it was inevitable. Like, you can enjoy the drama of Ilya and the head of safety and the others quitting, but as soon as OpenAI and AI in general became a massive industry force, there was no way they were going to stick around. It's just, that is the rules of the game. It's like the laws of physics dictate that there will not be powerful safety teams inside AI companies. I truly believe that.
I would say, I think they will have powerful safety companies or large safety teams. I think the scope of their authority will be limited.
Well, then they're not powerful.
I mean, maybe they're not powerful by definition then, but I think people like Ilya also are somewhat purists. They're researchers, they're academics, they're curious about the limits of the technology. They didn't join OpenAI as a research company to build a product company. I think there are always people in the early teams, not always, but often, who are like, I didn't sign up for this shit. That's not what I wanted to do. And so there's a cultural mismatch and they just they step away, whether it's safety or otherwise.
Did you have any final words on this topic, Emil?
My final words are, I feel like the world can handle, it's not like totally anything we've never seen in terms of unemployment. It may take a lot of money, maybe at a scale we've never seen before, but it's not like unknowable. How do you protect against the Lone Ranger who invents a bioweapon, which is what I hear Eric Schmidt talk about all the time? I don't know how to do that, but that's a thing. And then the AGIs talking to AGIs or whatever, the superhuman intelligence where they can control us. I mean, I don't know, maybe you do need a kill switch at OpenAI, not at the data center level. Or, that is so esoteric to me that I know the paperclip problem, I've read that and all, but I don't know how you regulate that.